Welcome everybody, I'm Cody Wilkinson with John Deere TIllage Specialist, and today I'd like to talk to you about our brand new field cultivator and some new improvements that we've brought with our brand new 2230. So what's behind me is a 52.5 foot floating hitch field cultivator. If I'm going to start in my purchase process and thinking about what's different or what we offer through John Deere, number one, I'd start with the frame width. So we make a 3-section and a 5-section field cultivator, and again what you see behind me is a 5-section. So I have a center frame, inner wings, and then outer wings. So we vary from down to 20 foot up to 70 foot on our floating hitch. So we have a wide variety of working widths. And then as I think about widths, the next decision I'm probably going to think about is what type of hitch to order. So we have two different hitch options. We have a floating hitch as well as a level lift. So why one over the other? If you have kind of hilly, rolly terrain, I would choose a floating front hitch. So that gives you a little more fore, after, up and down movement on the frame. I would say the one thing to consider there is the additional cost in that option. Where if you're in some kind of flatter, more level fields consistently, a level lift front hitch would be a good option for you. When we think about, again, our sizes, whether a 3-section or 5-section, and then our hitch, the next thing to consider would be what tractor am I going to pull that with. So number one, horsepower. And if I was going to use a rule of thumb there, again, back to size, the average for me is about 10 horsepower per foot. So if we use that rule of thumb with our size here, 52.5 foot, you're looking in that 520, 530 horsepower tractor to make sure you can consistently pull this at up to now 10 mile an hour. So that's another advantage I'd say of our 2230 over our 2210 is that we're able to achieve 10 mile an hour. So for you guys this spring that want to stay ahead of that planner, don't want to get out of bed at 3, 4 in the morning, you can sleep in another couple hours, let's say. This new field cultivator can definitely achieve up to 10 mile an hour working speed. The other thing, if we come back to tractor compatibility, I consider would be hydraulics. So on our field cultivator, we have raise and lower, fold and unfold, and then basket pressure if you option into that. So there's 3 SCVs that I'd need on my tractor. We do have an additional attachment for a finisher. So if you had a 200C as the model you could option in for, you would need an additional 2 SCVs for that option. So 3 will get you by most of the time, 3 SCVs, but if you optioned into a rear hitch, you'd need an additional 4th and 5th SCV to function with that rear attachment. So now we've kind of talked about size, hitches, and tractor compatibility. The next thing I want to highlight is the frame itself. So again, with our brand new 2230, we've moved into what's called a lattice style frame, and you can see there that back behind me, you kind of have a tube over tube, and the advantage of that is it's kind of freed up some space for us for shank mounting. So if we want to do 6-inch spacing or 9-inch spacing from one shank to the other, this frame style gives us a little more freedom, a little more open space to do that. So for example, if I'm on 6-inch spacing, I'm true 6 inches all the way across the frame. Where if we consider that on our 2210, there were a few spots where we were off, say, an inch or two, one side or the other, where frame members came together on a joint. So I would say one thing to consider on those is on our 2210s, our older model, sometimes customers would buy a wider sweep to kind of overcompensate for that wider spacing. So at times maybe that could come close to a tire or things like that. So one benefit now is true even performance across the entire width of the tool. So that new lattice style frame is a big improvement. One thing I also want to highlight up here is this controller here. Back behind this panel or this box is our True Set Tillage feature. And if I'm thinking of a customer in a customer's position, what is true set? Well, that allows me to control both depth and pressure from inside the cab. So similar to AccuDepth, but brand new sensors, brand new harnessing, brand new user interface. So this is much new and improved compared to your AccuDepth system. Like I said, this is now called True Set, where again, I'm controlling my sweep depth from inside the cab within 1/10 of an inch incrementally. And then if I option into my baskets on the backside, I can control down pressure on those. And actually you can see we still physically, even though we have True Set, we still physically have a gauge. And this is important because if I option into True Set, you always have a fail safe in my rod here. This controls, so I can thread this still. This controls single point, so a mechanical depth control. And then you have on the other side of this solenoid here with an Allen wrench, I can still control pressure to my baskets. So there again, if I ever have an issue with my controller, I can still make mechanical adjustments to both my depth and my pressure in the field if I'm ever in that situation. Another change that we have is actually on our standards. We have a spring here, and previously we had an option for 150-pound trips or 200-pound. We saw a very high take rate across the board on 200-pound trip force. So standard from the factory, every field cultivator that's ordered will come with 200-pound trip force shanks. So we see that as definitely a step in the right direction. Another option to consider is tires. This is always an important topic of conversation, no matter what you're buying from John Deere, but especially on an implement. And one very big improvement we have is we now have radial Firestone tires. They are an option on the center frame as well as the wings. So I can go with a center frame radial, which is actually what you see behind me, and then bias on the wings, or I can go radial across the entire tool. Now, a benefit of radials over our bias tires is they do very well in transporting up and down the road. So if you're going long distances, field to field, these radials do a real nice job. If I'm thinking about stubble resistance, they do a nice job there, again, on the center frame and wings. And they also do a very nice job with flotation. So we talked earlier about the ability to go up to 10 miles an hour with this new field cultivator. And a lot of the ability, in my opinion, or what I've seen in the field is when you start to get up to that 8, 9, 10 mile an hour on our previous design, or with those bias, you might start to see a little bit of hop on the frame. With these new radials, you'll see that tool really suck in and do a nice job. So in fact, with all these things I've just mentioned, radial tires, True Set, true 6-inch, standard spacing on the tool, all these things have helped us improve field finish. So not only are we able to go faster with the tool, but if we think about what's coming behind me, the planter, a lot of the feedback I had last spring was planter operators were able to achieve up to a mile an hour faster behind our new 2230 compared to our previous 2210 model. So all those things are very important. So one other feature that we took a look at when moving into this brand new field cultivator was maintenance. So if I think about what do I have to grease and how often on this new 2230, again, as compared to our previous model, is number one, our wheel bearings. So if I look down here, I have a grease zerk on every wheel bearing, and that's a 50-hour grease point. And then up here on my caster pin, I also have a grease point, and that's also a 50-hour grease zerk. The only other grease zerk on this tool is on my fore aft here on this rod. There's a grease nipple here behind me that's 250 hours, or I would say seasonal. So my wheel bearing, my front caster pin, and then my fore aft rod, which is seasonal. All other pieces on the frame, whether that's our wheel hubs, we have actually a polymer bushing that we can point out later, and I'll show you where we took our daily maintenance schedule and definitely tried to drastically improve that for you. So when ordering a field cultivator, there's a wide variety of sweep options. And what we have down here in front of me is what we call our Perma sweeps. So when we say Perma, it's actually a spring-loaded clip here that I'm pointing to. And if I'm physically looking at a sweep, I can see this notch here that actually on the backside you can see grooves where that spring catches in those teeth marks there. So when we say Perma, that is our quick attach system. One other option is actually a bolt-on sweep, which you can see here with these two holes laid out on that sweep. So if I'm thinking sweeps, Perma or bolt-on, and then once I've made that selection, the next thing I can think about is true width, which actually has a little bit higher crown, or high productivity, which is a little more profile or lower profile and sweeping. What I'd suggest for high productivity is, especially in heavy weed pressure, does a nice job slicing out those weeds, especially tall standing weeds, and does a nice job cutting through the soil. If you're operating at a lower depth, I've seen sometimes the high productivity sweep kind of skim the surface, where a true width with a little more crown on it does a nice job kind of sucking into the soil. The other thing I'd say about a true width is it tends to last a little bit longer, where the high productivity sweep, just due to its profile, has a tendency to wear a little bit quicker than the true width. And actually, that's one thing I also want to highlight to our customers and dealers, is we've just introduced a plus sweep, which actually has a hardened front edge here that you can see outlined on the front nose of either side of that sweep there. So these are available in limited supply, again, only on our high productivity sweep, but that's an option for you now out of our parts catalog. What you see here is actually a special tool that comes with every field cultivator, again, if your Perma option is ordered. So you can see there's kind of some teeth on the top and on the bottom that's used to hook onto that sweep, and then if I press down, I'm actually releasing that spring. So I have a little bolting hammer here, so if I unload that spring, give this a whack, just like that, you can release the sweep in a matter of seconds. So with TrueSet, you have the option with a sensor on the center frame to control depth, but we can take that a step further by adding sensors to our inner wings and outer wings, specifically on a floating hitch. So when I say side-to-side leveling, I first want to talk about the physical components. So number one, connected to this cylinder here, is this valve block and solenoid behind me. That has communication via this rod here to gauge distance or to control height of this front caster wheel. So we can electronically, via TrueSet, adjust depth through this cylinder for this wheel. So if in a scenario I want my inner wing or outer wing to be deeper or shallower compared to my center frame, I can control that via TrueSet. But what's mechanically doing that is this block and solenoid and this rod here that's going to help me control that. Now with that being said, I can also control my height on my front caster wheel mechanically with this nut here and this threaded bolt. What I have down here is actually the wrench that you get on your front hitch. So if I want to make an adjustment, well, first I'll point out the grooves and what they're for. This here is for my front hitch. This notch here fits over this nut for my depth control. And then also now I have a toolless adjustment. If I move this cotter pin, I can turn this buckle over, and that gives me ability to adjust my fore-aft levelness again by placing my wrench over top there. So pretty easy when we think about mechanical adjustment as well as true set adjustment or side-to-side leveling. That gives us an overview here of the components and ability to control that from the cab. Okay, so an additional item that we want to cover here with you today, again with our 2230 field cultivators, is our Pro Finish leveling system. So again, this is a brand new design, and it really starts with how it mounts to the frame. So I'm going to come up here, and you can see there's a couple bolts here that attach this rear attachment onto the frame. It's not held by U-bolts. So we're nice and sturdy there with what we're carrying behind us. And as far as adjustability goes, I'll start here with this T-handle. And what this chain link is allowing us to do is to set the drag length of my entire harrow bar away from my sweeps. So as we said earlier, we can get up to 10 miles an hour on these field cultivators. So as I go faster, and let's say I'm going deeper, at 3 inches deep, I start to move more soil. So if I want that drag, if I'm kind of rooster tailing and I want that drag to be adjusted further back, I can achieve that here by adding another link down on this T-handle. Another item here is these brackets here. These are anti-tangle brackets, so different from what you saw on the 2210s, and a little different than what you see on the inner wing and center frame. And the reason for that is because on a 5-section tool, our outer wings actually fold over center. So we have a different design bracket there, and again, what that's helping us achieve is to reduce or eliminate tangling of these harrows. Another feature that we added was the ability to quickly adjust our pitch, our angle of our harrows, and that's what we're achieving here with these pins. You can see on each bar, there's 3 different holes to set the aggressiveness or how heavy we're pitched, and where that becomes beneficial, I'll give you an example. Last spring it was pretty warm, so we had pretty heavy weed pressure, and if you're starting to ball up or collect too many weeds, you can kind of start to see a snapping action where you might want to lay these spikes down to kind of a less aggressive angle so that they can kind of sweep through or comb through those the heavy amount of weeds versus kind of balling up and snapping and releasing. So it's very quick to do, very easy to do that. If I'm thinking about optionality, we have 6 different rear attachment options with any combination between a coil tine, spike harrow, or what you see behind me, a flat bar basket or round bar. So just kind of like if you go into a fast food restaurant and you want ketchup, mayonnaise, and you name it, you can kind of order your rear attachment system the same way. You're not limited on optionality based on size of tool that you order. So whether it's a 40-foot or a 60-foot, you can get baskets, harrows, you name it, pretty much in any combination that you desire. So what you see here is really our most aggressive package, and that is a 3-spike harrow with a flat bar basket. So if I think of, breaking up those clods, the heaviest, our finest finishing, this is going to be our heaviest package for that. If I think of something kind of lighter duty, if you're in some sandier soils, probably a coil tine is what you'd want to option into there. Or the farther north you go, I know up towards Minnesota, gets a little muddier, a rolling basket or a round bar rolling basket as opposed to a flat bar might be a better option for you there too. So another element or piece I want to point out with our rolling baskets is this hydraulic cylinder. And you can actually see they're fully retracted right now. So again, from the cab, you can control that and raise these up out of the way. So these cylinders, like I say, allow you hydraulic control of the baskets. And again, with TrueSet technology, that is tied into the cab. So from your 2630 or whatever monitor you have, you can incrementally change pressure on the go, you know, up 25 PSI, down 25 PSI within 100 to 900 PSI working range. 900 being the max, and then of course floated or 0 PSI being the minimum. So you have a wide array of ability to control this basket while in the cab. So positive there. One other item I want to point out here with our baskets, we talked about the flat bar as being an option over a round bar, but one thing we talked earlier about the focus on maintenance. And these bearings are all greaseless lifetime bearings. So that is one other option that but one other piece that you see in base equipment with all these new field cultivators and mulch finishers is any basket that you select will come with a greaseless bearing. So earlier we were talking about different options on our new field cultivators. So number one is size, whether that's a 3-section or 5-section, and our next major decision is what type of hitch. Earlier we focused on a floating front hitch, and what you see behind me is here a level lift front hitch, and that can be noted by this tube, this front hitch tube here, which controls fore-aft adjustment for my entire tool. So this is a 5-section tool, and again, for the center frame, my inner wings and outer wings, the entire width of the tool fore-aft is being controlled right here on this front hitch, fore-aft leveling tube. So again, if I think about depth, I don't see a controller behind me that says true set, so all my depth control will be here on this single point. And if I think about the relationship between my center frame and wings, I have, again, a rod that can be mechanically adjusted to set my relationship between my center frame, inner wing, and outer wing. So a little simpler in design. Again, it's a nice option for those of you who have nice flat fields, but there again we have the floating hitch option for when you get into some more rolly terrain. So we've covered a lot of ground today with our new field cultivator, and I just want to reiterate that all the features and benefits we talked about today will carry over to our mulch finisher as well. So I've referenced our field cultivator model, our 2230, but should also again remind everyone that everything that you saw and heard today carries into our 2330, which is our mulch finisher. So important takeaways is, if we think about ease of adjustment, again, depth and pressure, I can do that with true set from the cab. If I think about another great sales feature, it's my radial tires. So I move from that bias to a radial on my center frame and wings. Another important feature is my finishing attachments. So you have 6 different options, whether you want coil tine, spike tooth, round bar, or flat bar, you have all those features at your disposal. Another key element is our entirely new design frame. So when we think about true 6-inch spacing or 9-inch spacing, you get that now with this lattice style frame. And I would say the final piece in thinking about this brand new field cultivator is productivity. So if I think about being able to go faster, finish smoother, I can do that. I can go up to 10 miles an hour, and then I can finish smoother to allow that planter that's coming in behind me to maybe gain a little speed that way too. And then also, as always, we're continuously focusing on uptime, which really means our daily maintenance. So greaseless bearings, greaseless bushings. We focused on, the wheels, the front caster pins, and then our fore-aft leveling rods as being the only thing that you have to grease on this equipment. So ultimately, performance, uptime, cost of operation, we've really focused on all those elements when it comes to our brand new field cultivator and mulch finisher with John Deere.